Good morning, everyone. This is Julie McDonald with Microcom Technologies, and I'd like to thank all of you for attending today's webinar, Cambium Networks. Today's host is John Mead, and he is their Vice President of Engineering and Product Development for switching, and he'll be presenting today. John, happy to have you with us today. If you don't mind, we're going to ask you some questions at the end of today's presentation, but for now, we're ready, and go ahead, take it on over.
Thank you very much, Julie, and hello, everyone. Thanks for your time today. So today's topic is about the most recent release for our CN Matrix line of switches at Cambium Networks. So I'll go through the content of our 6.1 release, and after that, let's see here. There we go. So yeah, I'll cover the software content of our 6.1 release. And then after that, I am going to do a quick little overview of the EX3K series of switches. Some have been released, but I'm going to give you a sneak peek on some new switches coming out soon. Okay, moving right along. So I'm going to talk to you today about switching, but before I do, I want to talk to you about something that's a little bit more important, and that's the overall solution that we provide. So it's not just about switching or just about our Wi-Fi access point or any of our other products. It's about how they all work together, and we call this one network. So when you buy a single vendor solution from Cambium, you do get this one network, this one solution, and you really do get a more powerful solution. You know, it gives you a 1 + 1 = 3. Our solution does work better together. Okay. Now let's get to switching. So this slide here is a kind of an eye chart for you. I'm not going to go through it in detail. It's more for your reference. This is a table that includes all of our switches at Cambium, and it has all the key attributes for each of the switches, so you can compare them side by side. So where are we with our roadmap? So up until just a few weeks ago, these are the releases that we had out. We had our 6.0 release that supported our new fiber aggregation switch, the EX3024F. And then back in late summer, we released 5.0.3, which was a big release for us. It had a lot of performance improvements and some small enhancements. But just recently, a few weeks ago, I guess it's been about a month, we released our 6.1 release, which is for all of the switches in our portfolio. And this is the topic for today's webinar. I'm going to go into detail on the contents of 6.1, and it's a pretty big release, lots of key features. Now, what's coming next? Just to give you kind of a snapshot view, we have a 6.2 release coming out in Q3 of this year. The big anchor feature for 6.2 is 3 new hardware platforms and some very important key software features. And then coming in probably Q1 of next year, roughly a year from now, is our 6.3 release. So let's focus on 6.1. And what do we have? So these first 3 features that I've listed are features that I'm going to do a deep dive on. So I have some slides dedicated to each of these 3 items. So PIM-SM, multiple IP helpers for DHCP relay, and some authentication and authorization security features 802.1x with MAB. We've supported those features in the past, but we've enhanced it with some additional flexibility, and I'll go through that. Now, in addition to these 3 big features, we also have made some PBA enhancements. So PBA is policy-based automation. It's a really big feature for us. It's a very differentiating feature for us. We've had it in our products for years, and there's lots of information available to you out there. It really does give you a easy deployment, a zero-touch type of a deployment. Well, we're constantly adding capabilities to PBA, and in this release 6.1, we've added the following. So these policies that you define for the network, these policies can now be applied with a time of day setting. So you can create a policy that is only in effect, as an example, from Monday through Friday from 8 to 5, or only on weekends. So this time of day enhancement is very useful. We've increased the number of actions that we support with PBA. So we have a long list of actions that you can put into your policies already, but we've added things like DHCP Snoop Trust. We've added STP Port Fast, and a pretty big one here is excluding previously statically defined VLANs. So currently with PBA, if the policy creates a new VLAN for you, that's in addition to the statically created VLANs that are already in place. However, now you can select an option that excludes those statically created VLANs. It's a big advantage for some. The third item, the third PBA enhancement worth mentioning is we provide a history of devices now. So for a certain port on one of your switches, of course, it shows you all the information about the current device plugged in, but now you can look at what were the previous devices that were plugged in to that port. This is a feature that's requested by many customers, and here it is. Another PBA enhancement worth mentioning is improved error tracking. This is very useful for us internally. Okay, what else? One network feature. So I mentioned one network at the beginning, and this is something we are putting a lot of energy into. So we're adding a lot of new capabilities for our one network solution. We have a new topology coming out that's been asked for by many. We do a lot with wired clients. We've always done a lot with wireless clients with our Wi-Fi APs, but now we also have a lot of information about our wired clients. And then also auto VLAN, that this automation feature has been extended to flow through our switches and to the NSE. So a little bit about auto VLAN. The way it works is when you plug Cambium's Wi-Fi access points into our switches, the switches and the access points have a proprietary communication so that the APs can tell the switch what SSIDs, or more importantly, what VLANs are needed for that AP to operate correctly. So the switch will automatically create those VLANs, automatically make that port a member of the VLANs, automatically make the uplink ports a member of the VLANs. And now with 6.1, it will migrate that information up to the NSE, and the NSE will also automatically create these VLANs. Okay, that's one network. One network is supportable via all of our management interfaces, but the CN Maestro interface is coming in the next release. Okay, ERPS is a feature that we've had on our switches for a very long time, except when we introduced the fiber aggregation switch last summer, ERPS was not supported. It's not a common feature for a fiber aggregation switch, but anyway, we do support it now in our 6.1 release. Okay, some additional features, IPv6 management. So prior to 6.1, IPv6 connectivity to our switch for management purposes was limited to devices on the same VLAN. Now with 6.1, the default gateway is obtained automatically through router advertisements. This enables you to use IPv6 with CN Maestro. It enables you to now manage with IPv6 devices across different VLANs. Now, the default gateway, not very common, but some want to be able to statically configure that as well, in addition to obtaining it automatically through router advertisements. And anyway, that static configuration is on our roadmap and is coming out in the next release. Okay, Auto VLAN, I mentioned this feature a few minutes ago. Auto VLAN up until this release supported 20 VLANs. So the AP can communicate up to 20 VLANs to the switch that would automatically be configured on that port. Now we support 200 VLANs. Let's see, ACLs. ACLs is something that we've always supported, but not on port channels or link aggregations. We now support ACLs on port channels. And then a bunch of miscellaneous scaling improvements, and these are big. So IGMP snooping, we've always supported up to 256 multicast groups, and that's plenty for almost all deployments. When you start talking about aggregation switches, you might need more, and since we just started recently shipping our fiber aggregation switch, we scaled up this from 256 to 512. Our MAC address table same thing for our fiber aggregation switch. We scaled this up from 16K to 32K. And then for VLAN specific spanning tree, we increased that from 32 to 64. All right. Oh, one more item. So OpenSSH. This is something that we are always upgrading. So we have upgraded to the latest version 9.8. And what that does for you is it solves any of the recent security vulnerabilities related to SSH. Okay, let's do a deep dive now on PIM-SM. So PIM-SM is very popular across many verticals, MDUs, hospitality, educational deployments, and so on. So why is PIM-SM needed? Well, first of all, it's used in multicast applications for things like IPTV, security cameras, and so on and so forth. So IGMP snooping is what is used for this as well. However, what PIM-SM gives you over IGMP snooping is the ability to deliver IP multicast traffic across VLANs, across devices that are located on other VLANs. It avoids duplicating multicast streams on multiple VLANs. Anyway, it allows multiple streaming sources, so the sources themselves can be located on different VLANs, and then the clients or receivers can also be located on different VLANs. So this is what PIM-SM does for you. Now, PIM-SM relies on some type of unicast routing capability. It is required, and you can use any routing capability that you would like. We support static routes, OSPF, or RIP. The management for PIM-SM on these CN matrix switches, we of course support our CLI. We support any SNMP application you might be using. You can do this with our web GUI. It is not yet supported in our CN Maestro cloud management platform, but is coming in the next release. Now, PIM-SM is not supported on every one of our switches. It's supported on our EX3K switches. So it's listed down here, the 3024F, the 3028R-P, and the 3052R-P. We support 64 PIM routing interfaces, and we support 8 PIM neighbors, and we support 512 multicast streams. Rendezvous point candidate group mappings, we support 32. So this is PIM-SM. Next feature is multiple DHCP relay helpers per VLAN. So advantages and benefits, it gives you the flexibility of controlling which DHCP servers are used for which client VLANs. So it provides for a more secure network and also provides additional load balancing. Now, previous to 6.1, we of course supported DHCP relay, and we supported multiple DHCP servers, but you can't exclude which DHCP servers are used by the clients. All the DHCP requests go to all DHCP servers. Now, with 6.1, for each DHCP client VLAN, you can override the global DHCP server setting. So DHCP relay can be disabled for specific client VLAN or subnets. So for a set of DHCP client VLANs, you can restrict which DHCP servers they use. Now this is supported on all of our management interfaces, except for CN Maestro again, and that is coming soon in our future release. Now this feature, this additional DHCP relay helpers, this is supported on all of our CN matrix switches. Okay, next deep dive. Authentication and authorization using 802.1x and or MAB. And we've always supported those features. However, we've provided additional flexibility. So prior to 6.1, authentication order was 802.1x. If it's enabled on that port, it would attempt 802.1x, and that is fixed. And then after 802.1x times out, then it would attempt MAB, which is MAC-based authentication, if it's enabled. That's how it worked prior to 6.1. Now with 6.1, you have a lot more flexibility of which one of those mechanisms, authentication mechanisms you want to use and the order. So the default is to use 802.1x only. That's if 802.1x is enabled. And then, but you have other configurable options. You can configure it to not use 802.1x at all and only use MAB. That was not possible prior to 6.1. And you can change the order. So if you want to support both 802.1x and MAB on a port, you can now prioritize which one is attempted first, 802.1x followed by MAB, or MAB followed by 802.1x. Okay, so this new feature is supported on all of our management interfaces, including CN Maestro. And this feature is also available on all of our CN Matrix switches, not just the 3K switches. Okay, I'm going to switch gears. So I just finished talking to you about the details of our 6.1 release. Now I'm going to talk about our 3K switches. So just kind of a quick overview of our switching portfolio to address this enterprise edge space, which is a huge market segment, right? It's $10 billion market segment or more now, closer to 15 billion. But this huge space, it's very common, not only Cambium, but other switch manufacturers will provide multiple switches or multiple options to cover this huge market. So for us, we have 3 series of switches. We have the EX1K, the EX2K, and the EX3K. So the sweet spot for us is the EX2K. We sell more EX2K switches than anything else. And that's kind of, when talking to a customer, that's where we'll start with the EX2K. Now, some customers are more cost conscious, not concerned as much about features, but are more concerned about price. And that's where we have the EX1K. The EX1K is approximately half the list price of our EX2K series. Now, the EX3K is for higher end enterprise deployments. It costs more money, of course, but it brings a lot of extra features and capabilities. One, probably the most obvious one, is dual removable redundant power supplies. So there's some customer deployments where they won't even consider a switch if it doesn't have dual redundant power supplies. So that's what comes with our EX3K series of switches. Also, the Ethernet ports, some of them have more than the typical 30 watts of PoE power. They'll come with 802.3 BT support, which is when using 4-pair PoE, it gives you 60 watts, or in some cases, even 90 watts per port. And that additional PoE power is important for some devices. A couple examples I'd like to give. One is security cameras. So security cameras have, pan and zoom, which is mechanical movement. They also sometimes have built-in heaters or coolers. And for those reasons, they might need more than the typical 30 watts of power that a PoE port will give you. So it can, these ports will support up to 60 watts for those types of devices. In addition to the security cameras, Wi-Fi access points is another really good example. So the higher end Wi-Fi access points with multiple radios, they can sometimes draw more than 30 watts. So again, another reason for these higher powered ports. The EX3K is also made with higher end silicon, which gives you more advanced features and can scale higher on existing features. For example, the size of the routing table. Another big thing about these 3K switches is we have higher density of multi-gig ports. So standard Ethernet supports up to 1 gig, 10, 100, 1000, so up to 1 gig of throughput. Well, now with some of these higher end Wi-Fi access points, you might need more than a gig. So multi-gig, 2.5 gig, we provide that functionality on these 3K switches. Okay, so our 3K portfolio, we have 3 switches that we've released so far. The EX3028R-P and the EX3052R-P, they were released back in summer of 2023. So about a year and a half ago, those have been shipping. The 3024F is not an edge switch, it's a fiber aggregation switch. And we started shipping that early last summer. So it's been shipping about 8 months now. The 2 new platforms I kind of want to give you a sneak peek on today are the EX3030RM-P and the EX3052RM-P. These are going to be a part of our 6.2 release, which is scheduled for Q3 of this year. So let me give you a little refresher on the two EX3K edge switches that are shipping today. Again, these have been shipping for about 18 months. And on the surface, they're pretty typical switches. We have a 24 port and a 48 port with 4 10 gig fiber uplinks. These switches, of course, are enterprise grade, L2, L3 line rate switching with no blocking. So sounds very similar to our EX2K switches, but what's new and what's unique on these 3K switches are the dual removable redundant power supplies that I mentioned. And just to be clear, this protects you against a power supply failing, which is good, but these power supplies very rarely fail. What it's really good for is that you can plug these two different power supplies into two different power sources or two different circuits in your deployment. It's much more common for a circuit to blow than it is for a power supply to fail. But anyway, dual removable power supply is very important. 802.3 AF/AT/BT. So from a power over Ethernet point of view, we do support BT with 4-pair PoE. So we can support up to 60 watts on these switches. Now, we don't support 60 watts on every port. On some ports, we support the typical 30 watts. And on some ports, we support the increased 60 watts. So on the 24 port switch, 12 of the 24 ports support up to 60 watts. And on the 48 port switch, 24 of the ports support up to 60 watts. Okay, these 3K switches I mentioned earlier, they use advanced silicon, enables more advanced features, and we can scale up more, like the route table size, on the existing features that we do have. Okay, so here's a quick comparison of the two switches I just talked about. So the two rows in this table are the switches that I just talked about. So a 24 port and a 48 port, 10 gig fiber uplinks, dual power supplies, and 60 watt capable on some of the ports. Now the two new switches that were coming out are as follows. So these two bottom rows are the new EX3030 RM-P and the new EX3052 RM-P. So on the 3030, that's a 24 port switch with 6 fiber uplinks. And so 6 is a little unique. A lot of switches come with 4. So 6 uplinks, and those 6 uplinks are 25 gig capable. So these are SFP28 ports, which means it's the same form factor. You can use transceivers that support 1 gig, 10 gig, or 25 gig. So if you're not ready to deploy 25 gig, that's fine. You can still use 1 gig or 10 gig. You just simply swap out the transceiver when you're ready. For the PoE, I mentioned 60 watts per port on the switches that are shipping today. On these two new switches, we will support up to 90 watts per port. And I'll just say that's very rare that you're going to need more than 60 watts, but it is there in case you do need it. Some of the higher end radios might need more than 60 watts. These two new switches definitely use high end advanced silicon. And the big difference with these two new switches, we do support multi-gig, so at 2.5 gig per port. So on the 3030 RM, all 24 ports support the multi-gig, and on the 3052 RM, 24 of the 48 ports support the 2.5 multi-gig, and the remaining 24 ports support 1 gig. Okay, what's next? So here's the fiber aggregation switch. We've been shipping it for 8 months or so, but let me give you a quick overview on it anyways. Very simple, very functional, very capable switch. It has 24 10 gig ports for aggregating your edge switches together. Now this switch is, it also has dual power supplies. They're not removable, but they are dual redundant internal power supplies. And that does solve the objective of being able to plug it into 2 different power sources. Okay, so that's the 3024F, and I do believe that is my last slide today. It is. So anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this information, a quick overview on our most recent 6.1 release. Julie, back to you. Any Q&A?
Thank you, John, very much for that presentation. And yes, sir, I do have a few questions for you. Okay. I'm going to read them off one at a time, give you a chance to answer. Here we go with the first one. Okay, let's see here. How does one network address scalability for growing businesses?
Well, scalability, let's see how to answer that. When you're adding, as you're scaling up your network, either adding more switches or more access points, I think what really helps here is with a single vendor solution is the ease in deploying these additional devices. So, I mentioned Auto VLAN. That's one of our zero-touch automated features. I gave a brief overview of that, but if you plug in additional APs into an existing network, those APs will automatically get their configuration from CN Maestro, our cloud-based management platform. Once the APs have that configuration, they will automatically communicate that up to the switch. So the switch will automatically create the VLANs necessary for that new AP, and the switch will automatically communicate that information up to the NSE, and the NSE will also automatically configure those VLANs. So it really makes the deployment, the initial deployment of these new devices as you scale up your network to handle that. Hopefully I answered the intent of that question. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. Perfect. Okay, if you're ready for the next one, I'm good to go.
I am ready.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Here it is. How does Cambium ensure that edge devices are secure and tamper-proof?
So PBA is a feature that I've mentioned, and there's authentication out there that you can use. For example, 802.1x, we do support that. But with PBA, we provide additional connection, additional security. With PBA, as you know, you can create policies for certain devices. Well, there's also the ability of creating what we call a default policy. So that default policy will match every single device that you could possibly plug into the switch. And so if you don't have a policy in place for that specific type of device, let's say your security cameras or your Wi-Fi access points, if you don't have a policy in place for a specific device, it will use the default policy that I just mentioned. And that default policy can be used to, not allow the device on the network to start, or it can be used to put that device into a remedial VLAN or a guest VLAN, and to give that device limited access to the network. So that default policy will be applied to every single device out there, and then only the devices that you know of and are aware of and that you want on your network, you'll create policies for those. And what happens is that these policies, when you create them, can be assigned a precedence. So the default policy uses a low precedence. Any other policies that you create will have a higher precedence. So they will take effect and the default policy will not. So anyway, a very, very useful scenario with PBA.
Excellent. Thank you for that, John. Next question here for you. What are the future plans for artificial intelligence integration in Cambium's product roadmap? If that's something you can address, that would be great.
Yeah, I might not be the right person for this. We talk about AI a lot internally, and we have a lot of internal plans. I'm not sure if we're really ready to communicate or talk about those plans yet. But from a management point of view, our CN Maestro is going to do quite a bit with AI from multiple cases, and I'll list two. One is from a monitoring point of view. So using AI, we can give a more succinct view of what's going on in the network for the customer. And then that's number one. Number two is from a troubleshooting point of view. So this is probably where we're putting the most energy, but taking advantage of AI to improve troubleshooting, to reduce the time required for troubleshooting, for that type of thing.
Excellent. Thank you, John. I realize AI is, a topic that some people are embracing or not embracing quite yet. And thank you so much for that. Your reply was perfect. Thank you. A couple more questions here. Let's see. What are the latest innovations or updates in Cambium's product portfolio? Is that something you can tell us about what's just around the corner, perhaps?
I'm sorry, Julie, repeat that. So what new products do we have coming?
Yes. What new products do you have coming? What's going to be added to your portfolio soon, if that's something you can address?
Yeah, so on the enterprise side of the business, and I'm more focused on the switching aspect of that. We have a pretty active roadmap. So we have a lot of so on the switching, for example, we have 2 major software releases per year, and we also have 2 minor software releases per year. So very active team, very active development, a lot of investment. And so I was talking about our software releases, but we're also rolling out new hardware. So for example, in my presentation, I talked about 2 new platforms coming out this summer. We actually have a third as well, not quite ready to talk about it yet, but these 2 new platforms coming out this summer, those are not small. These are big additions to our portfolio. EX3K, dual removable power supplies, 24 ports, all multi-gig capable, 90 watts available per port, 25 gig uplinks. Some pretty cool products coming. Now, I was talking about switching. So if I was to switch gears to like our Wi-Fi access point portfolio, same thing there. I'm not prepared to talk about it today, but a lot of a very active portfolio, a very active roadmap, and we're coming out with new APs all the time. For example, Wi-Fi 7 is the big buzz nowadays. So we have a great roadmap on that.
Excellent. Thank you, John. And summer is not that far away. So in just a few months, we'll schedule the next webinar and we'll be able to, talk about what you're ready to talk about, because it'll be right then and there, perhaps right around the release dates of these things. We can have our next webinar. Excellent.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. Yep.
Great. Terrific. Thank you. Last question here regarding technical support. The best place to go for that, would that be on your website?
Yeah, that's a place to start, but this is a great topic because this is where Cambium, where we feel that we're top notch, if not the best, with our support. When you call us for help, someone is going to actually answer the phone. We have a concierge service, a white glove service. We put a lot of energy into pre-sales, like everyone does. Of course, you want to close the deal, but we also put a lot of energy into post-sales support as well. So holding the customer's hand whenever needed, helping out in any way we can whenever needed, that is top priority at Cambium, and we talk about this daily. So we get great responses and feedback on the level of support we give.
Excellent, John. Thank you. I like that about technical support. That's such a big deal for everybody, and we always ask about it. So thank you so much for that and answering all of our questions today. And thank you for everyone who attended today's webinar. And if anyone has any further questions, of course, please feel free to contact your sales rep or email us at sales@microcomtech.com. And if you wish to review any of the products mentioned or shown here today, please remember that this webinar presentation has been recorded and will be uploaded to our Microcom YouTube channel later today. That way we can all view it again. John, I appreciate your time, appreciate all the information you shared with us today. And until next time, everybody have a fantastic day.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, John.